thought as people, which is in contraposition to the positioning school, or at least positioned that way in the book, and there are different versions of it in the book, is can be thought of as organizational learning as a simplification. At base, these people tend to think that the best way to make strategy is through organizational learning. Just to quote the book, the point they say is for the company to set off in one direction, learn from the response it gets from markets and competitors, and then adjust accordingly. And they tend to criticize the positioning school for overlooking the people involved and noting the fact that no strategy designed on paper has ever worked as planned. So, just for some additional editorializing, it is StratThink's, in my opinion, that this is the newest and most popular school of thinking, the people school. And we think that for two reasons. One is In Search of Excellence and the popularity of that book in the 80s and the 90s. And second is Jack Welch, who kind of embodied this ethos during his term as CEO of GE. And he's written on the topic a lot in the early 2000s. And you can point to one of his real life quotes that the book points to, which he says, in real life strategy, it's actually very straightforward. You pick a general direction and implement like hell. So a lot of folks kind of take that ethos from Jack Welch and apply it over and over again to just get out there, make plans, pick up from the plans what you need to be iterating on, and just go iterate. And I think that ethos pops up in a lot of different things. We can do more videos on that in the future if you disagree, but I think even though his legacy has been reviewed and it's a bit more complicated than initially thought, it's still highly influential. But even with Jack Welch, he recognized that we needed both. And an author that we cover in another book review, Richard Rummel in Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, wrote that, yes, he believed in stretch goals and he believed in getting out there and doing implementation. And he thought that strategic planning was a waste of time. But Jack Welch also said himself, the first step of making strategy is figuring out the big aha to gain sustainable competitive advantage, which is what you do in the positioning school. So even though his words were kind of about getting out there, his books may have been about getting out there, getting feedback from the market, very organizational learning, very plans focused, based strategy. He does say that you need to find a way to get sustainable competitive advantage, which is right in line with Michael Porter, who is the appointed leader in this book of the positioning school. So, like I said, we use both, and it's not really that much of a competition between the two. I just find that it's important to be flexible. Along with another book at StratThink, we have identified generally 4 schools of thoughts in strategy that we cover in our online course. And sometimes, personally, when I'm dealing with a new executive, I will, and I hope nobody thinks this is creepy, I will actually look on their LinkedIn page at when their career started and what function they started their career in to get a sense of what arguments might be persuasive to them. If it's anything prior to the 1980s, it might be more about strategic positioning. Anything since the 1980s or the 90s or the early 2000s, then they're probably going to be more of this purported Jack Welch ethos. And then there are other schools of thought and functions that I can layer in there to help understand when I'm working with people. And that's just an example of how we try to be flexible. And I think generally most people try to be flexible in their strategy making and their strategic decision making process. But for the purposes of the book, the real life history is told through the competition between these schools and other schools of thoughts. And I think it's a great organizing mechanism within the book as well.